Now my presentation is called Volunteers and Artists in the Tallinn Painters Guild. My task today, alongside all the beauty we have heard already, is to shed light a little bit and what was happening around in the same time in our region. What was done here, what was thought about art, and what was like. It wasn't easy to find the topics, such a broad field, something compact and focused enough. So I decided to explore a question what has often come to my mind while I working these themes. So that's the main topics. Where is our early modern Michal Sitov? Why don't we see big master in 17th or 18th century in Estonia art history? No Michael Seaton or Herman Rode. We don't have a lot of artwork from this early modern period survive, but we do have enough to get sense of local art scene. And we have archival references also, enough to form a sense of general visual level. Let me show few examples. Here is the epitaph on Henrik Köseken from Kullamaa Church. This message here is clear and traditional. Christ on the cross and donor family below. All the expected elements are present, but what's missing is the precision of the tile and or the refined finished the work. What kind of work we can see at the same period in Germany or the Netherlands. The figures are static and stiff, and the faces and anatomy is naive, proportion is uneven. The second example is the Last Supper from the Art Museum Estonia. We don't know its original location, but looking at how popular the Last Supper motif was in our region in post-Reformation altarpieces, it likely came from one. And the third piece still in Põlva Church today, and is again telling, not refined and deeply rooted in the local practice. Again, distinctive, but not painted by a highly skilled master. And this is the key question I want to discuss today. What influenced the artistic level here? What explains the difference in level? Why don't we see artistic masterpieces here, the kind of quality we saw in the Middle Ages? These are several interrelated reasons. The first factor to highlight is the limitation of the local art landscape. There was no court and no real patronage network. Tallinn and Estonia more broadly was far from the cultural centers of Europe. Even Stockholm, our closest court, was still developing artistically at that time. The local market itself was small. While people from Tallinn studied at top German universities, that influence didn't easily reach the visual culture back home. Private art collections had started to appear, and owning paintings at home was becoming more common, but there still wasn't the kind of demand who would support spending on art or promote art education. The City Council and the Great Guild of Merchants and the churches were the main commissioners, but still they need the expectation for art were low. There were also private clients, but unfortunately very little information about them survived here. On top of that, there were clear class barriers. At the time, art was seen as craft and remained firmly in the hand of artisans. They were ordinary people and their education and worldview didn't support higher artistic ambitions. Members of the higher social classes typically didn't engage in making art. It simply wasn't seen as something appropriate for their status. The first nobleman known to become an artist and received an academic art education in Germany was Ernst Wilhelm Londisser. He was active as an artist in the last quarter of the 17th century here. And here are a few works by Londisser. They are technically more advanced, yes, but still far from European elite. The second important factor was the restrictive influence of the guild system. As mentioned earlier, art was seen as craft and therefore belonged to craftsmen. Ambitions were practical rather than intellectual. One simply did the work that needed to be done using the skills learned from the others' masters. The Painters Guild was officially established in summer of 1637. The guild first charter, which I show on the image, you can't read what I just love, archival documents. But in these documents made no distinction between ordinary decorators and portrait painters. Everyone had the same rights and duties. There was little room for specialization or innovation to appear. The guild system became more and more closed during the early modern period in our region. And the guild protected its own. Its goal was to keep balance in the labor market, not to create some competition. The aim was social stability. Everyone should have the work and work should be fairly divided. It was very important in our handcrafts. That's why guild life often focused keeping outsider out. A common saying was, don't let someone else take the bread from your mouth. It's very, very often in written documents. And the working methods remained unchanged for a long time because craft was taught from master to apprentice, and the master exam required specific task. And artistic methods became the standardized. Innovation was just not needed. A master here was essentially a small business owner. There weren't enough commissions to support large workshop, what we heard about earlier, or creative collaboration. Even small jobs were often split between several masters. And the guild specialization model meant that income from such work was divided. Workshops were also small, and the larger works, such as church commissions, often had to be done on site, which also affected the quality. The third factor that shaped the local art scene was limited access to commissions. New commissions were primarily for old local masters. They had the power and shaped the community attitude to the free masters also. Most of ambitious young artists left. Guild records from the 18th century, we don't have any of the 17th century, only 18th century, but that only shows that only a small fraction of apprentices ever became master in Tallinn. They left. And what about free masters? Good free masters working outside the guild have helped raise the level of local art. It was also a question for me. As I already mentioned, the guild was becoming increasingly closed. and the original version of charter didn't say anything about free masters. But already in December, in the same year, the masters was seen before the city council to raise the issue. They approached the council with the request to more clearly define the working area of freelance painters. The city council decided they could paint according to Lübeck tradition, but only if they stayed out of guild-sanctioned domains, unless they joined the guild. It was a very controversial issue. Free masters were allowed to work independently, but their scope of work was clearly restricted. On the other hand, there was also a desire to create space from the more skilled masters within the guild itself. In the 1654 version of the guild charter, the organization was renamed the Guild of Portrait Painters and Decorators. It's something already. So we see two parallel developments, the introduction of free masters and the attempt to give higher level painters a place within the guild. Free master did arrive in Estonia, but their position remained unstable. Constant protest from guild members meant that these painters needed written approval to work. Few such approvals survived. The first known letter was for the food giver Christian Ackermann. More often we know of masters who received free master status elsewhere and then came to Tallinn. For example, Hans von Hemsen, who received his free master's letters from Lübeck. It's also not very modern in this time. And this is here masterwork from 1625, which depict the Lübeck City Council. And here you can see a signed sketch from 1633, also Hans von Hemsen. He came to Tallinn in 1630s, but didn't work much due to blindness. His son, Albrecht von Hemsen, is also known. One freelancer painter, we have almost surviving work, a blurry photo of an altarpiece is painted in Narva by Christian Thun. He was a Swedish master who studied in Lübeck and arrived in Tallinn 1687. He came into conflict with the guild. His property was confiscated and eventually left for Narva. This church was later destroyed during Second World War. And all we have left from this altarpiece is this unfortunate photo, which sadly tells us very little about this actual artistic level. But another possible work by Thun is Mayor Narva in this time. It may be also painted by Christian Thun. It's and next to that, the portrait of King Charles XII of Sweden, it's by Johann Heinrich Wedekind, who worked in Tallinn, Stockholm, and later in St. Petersburg. Wedekind is much better known to us. A significant number of his works have survived, giving us a clearer sense of his style and level. It also possible that the ceiling painting on the next room is made by Johann Heinrich Wedekind. You can look at it. It's very, I liked it very much. To end, pair portraits attributed to Ernst Wilhelm Londisser, who I mentioned earlier. He received his free master letters in 1687 from King Carl XI. and worked for the nobility. He couldn't and didn't want to join the guild because his noble status. Once again, a reminder of the class barrier of that time here in Tallinn. Yes, they were here, but not great numbers. And even these more qualified painters still had to do wall decoration to make a living, which always meant a conflict with the guild. There simply wasn't enough high-level work to support them. We can see this was not an attractive market for truly great masters. This brings us to the final and perhaps most important reason for the limited artistic level, the lack of work. The local community's need for art was simply too small to support high-level masters. To illustrate this point, I'd like to show one last example. Very beautiful. It's newly uncovered sailing painting in the House of Nobility in Toompea. It's likely the most refined 17th century artwork in Estonia. But it was not painted by a local. It was done by a foreign master, possibly invited just for this commission. We don't even know his name. So, yes. Our cultural context in this time was periphery. Our visual culture was shaped by practical commissions and limited demands. Patrons wanted what they knew, not what was new. The artistic level we see here wasn't the result of lack of talent, but a limited system. That's why we didn't see artistic revolution here. Instead, a stable and time-closed visual culture remained. But that's not the only possible value or meaning of art. The visual records we have limited, yes, it may be, tells a much bigger story. It reflects the time, worldview, and the set of values. And for that reason, these works are still deeply important. Their simplicity, their sincerity, their local roots, all of this makes them worth preserving. We shouldn't compare them to the greatest work of Europe. They have their own power. Just as a local singer can't move us without being, can move us without being an opera star. These paintings can be meaningful without being masterpieces. Despite their anonymity, these works are deeply subjective and personal. They bear the strong imprint of their makers. Even in their lack of technical polish, they express real emotion. We may not know the names, but these are unmistakably author-driven works. Value that we understand and admire more and more today. They are important not despite their simplicity, but because of it. And they are absolutely unique. The apostles in Põlva search today, they were not trying to impress a court. They were trying to comfort the parish. I believe this is a very meaningful way to look at the local art. The Last Supper in the collection of Tallinn City Museum, incredibly beautiful, so delicate, full of feeling, deeply religious. These works made last and to be understood. I think it's very important to help local audience also recognize their value. Like the view of the altar in Ridala Church. It's a remarkable constellation, medieval murals, Baroque altarpiece and 17th century painting of the Last Supper, all in one view. You couldn't design it. It's kind of unit can't be constructed. It's like installation of time. This beautiful ensemble is powerful example for the richness and layered nature of our heritage. And it's clear that despite all its imperfections, there is no reason to undervalue any of its local art. And before I give the floor to the next speaker, few words about our research project. In recent year, our team has been working on REACH project focused on local painters. This is our dream on a trip in the Museum Poland, Poznan, which holds many Baltic German works, including many by local painters from our region. And we also building a database. It currently includes 814 names of artists. It covers the period from 1637 to 1900. The project began with the focus on painters and planned for publication in September 35. Here are screenshots of the underlying spreadsheet. This unfortunately don't reveal much just yet, but maybe this can help demonstrate that we have incorporated a large amount of information, but from earlier researchers as well as archival sources. And warm thank you to my project colleagues and also to Pia Ehasalu, I'm Soon, yeah, and Krista Kodres and all the earlier researchers whose work we have relied on. I hope it will be helpful to everyone interested in local art and the history of the guildmasters. If I may end with the words that inspired this seminar, they illustrate well the main idea I've tried to express. No man is an island, and the lines continues. Every man is a piece of continent and part of the main. It's nice to think this way, I think. Thank you.